Welcome to Unashamed Unafraid, a show unashamed about sexual addiction recovery and unafraid of coming unto Christ for healing.
Where we talk about real recovery stories, answer anonymous questions with experts, and share resources that actually work.
I'm your host, Steve.
And I'm your co-host, James, and we are Unashamed Unafraid.
So this is a big deal.
Because we got a big guy on there.
He's a big guy. Rob's not a big guy. I'm a big guy.
True. A big-hearted guy.
There we go.
So there's like certain people that if they were to call me on a burner phone and be like, I need you to grab a duffel bag, I need you to bring these 6 items, and I need you to meet me at this location right now, I would just be like, yes, sir.
Done.
And just drop whatever I was doing and do that. Rob is one of those people.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So we talked about it in the episode, but if you have not heard us talk about a warrior heart, then it's your first time listening. So we welcome you here.
Welcome to the show.
You will hear about it in this episode like we talk about in every other episode. But when we recorded this with Rob and he kind of came in, Jason, was like, oh, kind of who are you? And we're like, Jason, this is the godfather of Warrior Heart happening. Mm-hmm. So he had been to Eldridge's in Utah, right, and came back and was really the fire starter.
Colorado.
Oh yeah, in Colorado. Sorry, yeah. Right. See, Eldridge's in Colorado, and was like, dude, we got to start this fire. Right, like that's the seed planter right there. So, and I will still to this day, and I even have spoken, and we've had so many different people. Favorite speaker at boot camp, hands down, Rob.
Absolutely.
The way he prays, the way his passion for this message has just really lit a fire under so many of us.
Oh yeah.
And just changed so many lives. And that's why when I talk about God or talk about Rob, it's just, man, it just gets me because he means so much to me. Because I wouldn't be where I'm at today had Rob and I had the courage to bring this message to Utah and change these lives. And really, when I say he changed my life, he changed every aspect of my life because he showed me the love that God has for me and that I'm loved no matter what I do.
And Chris is a prayer. Let me tell you something about my friend Chris Bennett. That guy knows how to pray. Yeah. And so for context, right? I mean, this episode's about fatherlessness. And this is one of those like shame and disclosure that I'm like embarrassed that we haven't done this episode sooner.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting as we were talking about this, like when James was like, Rob's the guy, for all of us, that was such a fit. Because maybe he's not the perfect speaker about fatherlessness, but it was fun to sit back for me because the two of you are so close to him, right? I mean, I know Rob and have definitely benefited, but you guys know him so much more, and right, serving with him and stuff. To see a fathering relationship in real time while we're talking about fathering, I think is a cool experience that I was able to have as we were recording this episode.
Yeah. I can think of so many fathering moments with Rob, from helping me do when I was invited to be a speaker at boot camp and having Rob sit with me for a couple hours, and help me build that fatherless session, help me really conceptualize that for myself for the first time. It was amazing. And then, which
then brought you to me to follow me in that same message,
right?
That same session.
And who spoke on fatherlessness my first time up at boot camp? James.
Yeah.
With that, I think that might have been the first time you spoke about fatherlessness. Was the first time I went up.
The first time I did was in Alaska.
Okay.
But it was the first one that was revamped from Alaska after I'd spoken with Rob. But anyway,
because you totally changed it.
Yeah, I did. Rob helped me change it into something that I felt just really good about. But I'm just thinking back, like, being invited to do the AV on the staff, and I remember being back there, and it's like my first couple of times, and like Rob would just like read when I'm panicking, right? And he would just come up and he'd put his hand on me, or he'd kneel down next to me and be like, "Hey man, you got this. Just breathe, be calm. Like God's got you." Just those tender moments, right? And I just look back on all of those, and I'm so grateful for Rob and the role that he's played in my journey. And, and I think about when we all come to the end of our lives, there are certain, heroes that we will have in our journeys as we will go on our, as we look back on our life, those game-changing people, right, that we all have. And it's like, Rob plays a role in that for me. And there's a few heroes on my journey, right, that have changed the trajectory of my life in one way or another. And Rob is absolutely up there with, because of boot camp, literally changing the spiritual trajectory of my life up into that point.
Well, and I think hearing the two of you talk about it, like, that's what you're going to get out of this episode. And I think our real message is, like, you need to find some freaking fathering. So, you may not get Rob the way that we've gotten Rob, but that's okay. I hope that a takeaway from this, as you listen to this episode, is how important fathering is. Here's a couple people. Chris, your story changed my life. And had you not found any fathering, right? You lost your father at a young age, right? James, you had an abusive father. I've navigated a relationship where I had two dads. I had the dad that did all the crappy dads do and checked out, and then met me later in my life and invites me to lunch and just paid for me to go to therapy and figuring out the pieces of that. And, I hope as you listen to this episode, that you can experiencing in some level just the value of fathering, and I hope that will lead you to our true Father, right? To God and repairing that relationship. And so we obviously think Rob's awesome. So I hope that you get that same feeling with us that we have for him. I think you will. I super encourage you to listen to the whole episode, and I will just leave it at that. I think there's some real beauty at the end of this episode that I don't know where you're going to get somewhere else. And
make sure that you guys listen to the bonus content. Become an outsider, because the bonus content is awesome as well.
Right. And so becoming an outsider, unashamedunafraid.com/donate. We are a 501c3, and all of our donations go to helping people engage in resources such as going to boot camp, going to therapy. And so donate, big or small, whatever. Join us in that bonus content. Some really cool things shared in the bonus content for sure. Our outsiders are awesome. To those who are already outsiders, you are truly changing the world. And also, we have those scholarships available. So if you were in need, please, you are worthy of it. unashamedunafraid.com/scholarships. Please give us 5 stars on iTunes. That's how the world finds us. Follow us on social media. We'd love to hear from you at Unashamed Unafraid. Ask anonymous questions. If you've got a story to share, email us, any of us, at Unashamed Unafraid. All the good things that I'm supposed to say as a host. Who cares? Let's just get in the studio with Rob and get some fathering on. Woo! So you're not even Rob Chidester to me. You're not even the therapist, lifestyle Rob. Like, you were just Rob. Like, you loom so influential to me, like that. I'm like, I should just say Rob, and the whole world should know who that is. But we're just happy to have you here, man.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited.
So for those people who have not been as blessed as I have to know you, paint yourself into context for us.
Well, I met all these guys over the years. I was involved in the kind of the beginning ground zero of getting boot camps going. And
boot camp would not exist had he not taken the time and been
he's
like,
already kind of being a shrinking flower here.
Okay.
Yes.
So in 2008, I went to Colorado and went to Wild at Heart boot camp. Scared to death, thinking they'd kick me out any second. I was an imposter and unwelcome. Found just the opposite. On the way home, I called Todd Olson and Dan Gray and said, "We got to do this. We've got to figure out a way to make this happen. This is amazing. It's life changing." So we got the first one going. Chris was there. I remember a lot of tears.
Lots. I like blubbering, bawling, crying, like trying not to be like super loud, kind of bawling my eyes out. And that was because of Rob.
You were trying not to cry because he didn't do a very good job.
Yeah, that was me not trying not to cry.
Yeah. No, and it's not like that for everybody. I don't want to scare anybody off. I don't want to go to this thing and cry, but
no, it was just because of the fatherlessness stuff that we talked about that we're going to talk about today. That just hit me, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But completely life changing for me. Changed every bit of my life.
Yeah. I mean, it changed my life too, and it's been amazing journey. So we did them. I did them for about 10 years, and then I kind of stepped away, and I'm trying to get some other advanced boot camp type of activities put together so that we can just kind of take guys a little further. So anyway, I went back to Colorado several times, did their advanced boot camp and Become Good Soil events, and it's just been a constant journey of change and growth and healing. And but this is what opened the door for me, was that boot camp experience. So
and you'd already been a therapist for how many years?
Oh gosh, 15.
Right, so already has the background and experience of someone who's been a therapist that long and then steps into this message.
Right, yeah, I kind of did. I worked for a public mental health for 10 years, and it was more like case management. Mm-hmm. And so in 2006, I got invited to a Lifestar training, went and just was like, I don't even know how to do this stuff. This is way deeper, kind of fit me a lot better. And so I was at that very first conference, and some guy said something that they were talking about something to do with the masculine journey. And my ears just perked up. I just knew inherently there was something that I'd been missing for my whole life. There was something that I was trying to get from men, and I couldn't put it into words. I didn't know what it was. It felt, just kind of validation or approval or, like confirmation of what I was doing, like support, stuff like that. And so I heard this in this conference, and this guy just mentioned Wild at Heart. So 2 months, and I wrote it down, and like most trainings, I just forget it and goes in a notebook somewhere. And so I'm at Walmart 2 months later, and this would have been still 2006. And I'm at Walmart, and there's The Way of the Wild Heart, which was the precursor to Fathered by God, just sitting on the shelf. And I'm like, I think this is the one that he was talking about. I grabbed it off the shelf and bought it right there. And I read the first 2 chapters on fatherlessness, and I was just blown away. I mean, I couldn't read more than 2 or 3 pages, and I was just in tears because it just spoke to me and just kind of explained what had been going on for me this whole time. This longing that I'd had finally made sense.
So I guess, and it'll continue to launch as we get into this episode, but all of us have been fathered by you on some level. Mm-hmm. And so when we've been wanting to do an episode on fatherlessness, because it's such a big topic, right, in addiction recovery, it's such a big piece of at least what we've seen when people find healing. So we're kind of sitting around. We like to pull these experts in for different posts. Mm-hmm. And you and I talked before, right? Sent as a boot camp, and I'm like, this podcast, we should, cross. And you've people in your clinic who I know recovered and stories. And then it was James. We were like, fatherlessness. He's like, Rob. And we were like, yes, sir. Like that's the, so to get us started for people who are newer on this journey, like, why is fatherlessness such a big deal?
What is
tell
it?
us what that means. What is it? Mm-hmm. Like,
yeah, it's, it's a little bit difficult to understand. I think people struggle with it a little bit, and I really did at first too, because it's sort of like a gut experience of and we have three core desires as men: to have a battle to fight, adventure to live, and a beauty to rescue. And but for some reason we can't live up to that, and the reason is because we haven't had a sense of our masculinity being completely grown or completely restored. We don't really feel like men. I mean, a lot of times our anger, our frustration, our getting upset, being shying away, shrinking away from doing the things that we're supposed to do as men in the culture or in religion or in anything. It's because we don't feel like we've really been brought to a point that we can handle what's being asked of us. People joke all the time about like somebody getting a calling or doing something like that, and you can see people just shying away from that, hoping they don't get that calling or that job or that whatever it is, or not knowing how to take care of things, around the house or whatever it is. And so that sense of, I don't know what to do, I'm not sure that I'll be able to make this happen, and I will feel like a giant failure for not knowing. Somehow I know I'm supposed to know, but I just don't have that sense of knowing down deep in my core, in my heart, where it feels substantive and like, whatever comes, I'm going to be able to handle. I'm going to be okay. And not that I know how to do everything myself, but I know who to go to. I have men in my life who can show me, can tell me. And that doesn't happen for most men very well. We just kind of get thrown into, we go through school. Okay, now you've graduated. Now you just should know what your career is and go do it. And that's sort of it. There's no real process. For thousands of years, there were men around. You'd grow up, you'd work in your dad's shop. He'd show you all the ropes. You'd learn gradually over decades even. And then at some point you'd take that over, and we just don't have a structure like that in our culture today. And so we don't know, we don't have a sense of being really settled in what we do. And so we just learn how to play the role of a man, but deep down inside, when the chips are down, we just don't feel that sense of security, that sense of confidence within ourselves that we can do it, or we know who to turn to that can help us to do it. And so we just kind of wander, we kind of avoid, we kind of shy away from things, we shrink at things, or we charge at them and see, I'm the man, look at me, and so those are, and so that sense of a loss of this, what to do, how to do it, that I'll be able to pull through. And if I don't, that I'm okay, that I'm still a good man, even though I couldn't do it. All of that comes only if you have a sense of your masculinity, of your being intact and being strong and being secure, regardless of circumstances, regardless of behavior, performance, outcomes. And most of us get so tied into those things. And then if we can't pull it off, if we can't pull through, we're just so full of shame. We're so full of failure. And so we just either avoid those things, blame someone else, and all of those behaviors and all of those tendencies that we have are just part of what reveals to us our lack of healthy, strong, secure fathering that we've experienced throughout our lives. When we have that kind of experience, and I think relatively few people do, there's just that sense of confidence. It's there, and you're okay failing, you're okay succeeding, you can do your best, you can say yes, you can say no, you feel confident in it. And for most of us, we have to realize through our failures that we don't have that sense of being fathered, of having masculinity bestowed upon us. And so we have to just wing it, pretend, fake, pose to appear that way. But we don't really have that settled sense. And that's kind of what I was referring to earlier in 2006. I knew I didn't have any of that. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't have put a word to it. I was being put in positions because of my gifting that I was that I was qualified for technically, but emotionally felt completely overwhelmed. But I was good at pretending, and I put myself in a position of being one of 5 leaders in an agency, and I just knew in my heart I just wasn't settled. It wasn't a true example, or my heart wasn't truly ready for that, and I bailed, but I blamed them, for leaving. And all of that just came from all that fatherlessness. And so when I found something that explained all that, it was just such a huge relief.
Yeah. So you touched on like 100 things in there, right? Like, so
you said overview.
Yeah. So that's a good overview. I mean, within there, we're talking about the insecurity that comes from this lack of masculine bestowal, right? And you talked about generationally, there was often a type of initiation into manhood, or this apprenticeship as a father and a son work side by side, and then you hit on when we don't have that, how we become really insecure, and instead we just kind of fake it instead, and then what we're doing with that, and all of that is kind of revealing to us this fatherlessness that's within us. Right?
Yeah. So when we say fatherless, what we're referring to is there's a process of fathering that we all need to have, where a good man with a good heart that has perspective, that has been fathered, can help us to see what we don't see, can call us out where we're inadequate, can give us permission to be right where we are in the masculine journey. We live in a culture where you want to be the guy, the go-to guy. Well, you become the go-to guy by not being the go-to guy for a long time. And so someone who will hold you back and keep you from taking on things you're not ready for, who can look at your heart and say, your heart's not ready for this. And so that process of having men in your life who can be honest with you, who can tell you the truth, that can help you face your shame, face your fear of failure, whatever it is, and walk you through it and help you to feel heard and understood and carried through that process, then all of those issues and struggles can be kind of worked through. So the process of having somebody do that for you is the process of fathering. And so really most of us get fathered not by our dads, although that can be for good or for bad, that can be a really powerful.
Well, and I in your overviewing of it, I think something that is ringing true to me is that will never happen and never work. No one will have a dad here that's the full package, right?
No
matter how good or bad. I mean, because I think, Kurt Frankham, who talked about all the time, leading saints, he and I have this conversation all the time.
Sure.
He's like, your childhood was way messed up. Like mine really, really wasn't. And I'm reading all the books and doing the therapy and the things, but still this hits him so hard as it hits me. And any man, because it's not, you're talking about this larger cultural experience and grounding. And it just isn't going to happen. That one guy you call dad cannot fill that gap of fathering that's really needed, no matter how good of a guy he is.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's often what we do. I think that's what I was doing all through my 20s. I moved to a rural area when I was right out of graduate school, 25 years old. And because I thought these cowboys are going to be able to teach me how to be tough. And I was walking around trying to figure out which one was going to be the one, and I remember trying to find one of those guys, and nobody seemed to know how to balance, being a tough guy with being like tenderhearted, good man to his wife, the way all the country songs made it sound. And so I literally would go from man to man. I remember in hindsight, I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but just like that's what I was seeking for, in all these, male relationships, is some type of fathering. And, probably early in my process, I was just looking for that one person. what I found is it just comes through multiple men in multiple situations, and different people bring different things. And I've even found that with my own sons, that I need other men to fill in where I can't, other guys that have and know things that I don't.
So, I think some of our listeners might be kind of like, so why is this masculine bestowal so important? Right. And what does that mean? How does that go about? And what does that do for somebody? Like, I think this concept kind of gets a little lost, right? Because we're living in a world where masculinity, for the most part, is it's toxic, in a lot of in our society right now. And there's a lot of kind of anti-masculinity.
Many men get is it emasculation?
Yeah.
Emasculated,
right? Well, it's one end of the spectrum or the other, right?
Yeah.
Like either you were totally a domineering, abusive, angry, right? I think that's right. The image that everyone who's angry about Donald Trump, I'm not making a political statement either way, but the image that they paint him as, right? It's domineering. It's I will use my power to control everyone, or right, that view, right? Or I'm Homer Simpson. I'm about a beer and boobs and nothing else matters. Man, I'm this blumbering idiot. Right. And I don't care where you watch TV, what streaming service you have, like 80%, 90% of the men that you see on there will fit one of those two descriptions. Right? I'm either James Bond, that I can slay any woman and any bad guy, and I have ultimate power and I'm the man, or I'm a Homer Simpson that you laugh at and mock. But yeah, and so it's like there's no, both those polar edges are damaging for different reasons, but
well, and that's the example we get, that's why I'm saying so few people are initiated, because there are so few well-initiated men to lead out and help people be able to find, go through that process. And so back to your question, I think the initiation process is a process of a person going through years really of development to be able to through stages where we have very specific things that we need to be able to accomplish during those stages, and that will kind of give us a map of how we can arrive at a sense of being able to be the kind of man that God could entrust his big things, and your heart's ready to handle it, where you can stay grounded and stay true because you've been through that initiation process. And so we don't we need that because that's kind of the way we're wired. We're in Father by God, John Eldridge talks about boys in men's bodies. Most that's mostly what we run into, are boys in men's bodies, and they're not boys because they want to be. They're boys because they just never had anyone safe enough, real enough, that's been initiated well enough that they can that they could help somebody else without harming them through that process, and know where their limitations are and what they have to offer. And so there's lots of ways of being initiated. Or learning about masculinity. There's a kind of a joke that I've heard passed around about being fathered by YouTube. There's all sorts of things you can learn on YouTube, and all those things can be useful and can actually provide some of that. The problem is that most people think they're just learning how to fix a pipe. And what they're not aware of is that there's something deeper, more soulful, more down in the heart that can provide, that goes beyond, I got that task done, and into the core of who I am as a man and as a human being, that helps me be able to have a sense of being complete, effective, and then my sense of masculinity is raised and healed from that experience. And so it requires a completely different focus that we just don't hear of that often, where I'm trying to do something for my soul and I'm not just trying to get the job done. And so much of what we do just has that tasky kind of focus. And this is about watching, say, that video so that my masculine soul can be healed so I can feel competent and capable in ways that I wouldn't otherwise.
Right.
And that's a way bigger deal. And so we have to be aware of the need for masculine initiation, the need for our masculine hearts to be awakened, to be led, and to find people who are a little further along the path and are trying to take that path. And they're quite frankly, they're tough to find. And if you do, they probably have a piece to offer, as we were talking earlier. And, very few people can do the whole thing.
Right. And so there's in all of like our shows and in our podcasts, there's often this element of fatherlessness that comes up in addiction, right? There's this sense that they didn't have, a father or a parent that really either spoke to their worth or their masculinity or whatever. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are on the interplay with addiction and fatherlessness, and why those two often are playing in the same sandbox together so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd have a hard time finding anybody who's has a problem with addiction that has been fathered well. They just they always go together. And so, I think that there's, there's generally in where this father experience needs to start is in the early stages of a young boy's life. And so in Fathered by God, John Eldredge talks about the first initial stage of the beloved son, where you get about 12 years to or so, it's variable, but you get a decade to just learn that you are loved and beloved, and that you're safe and that you're taken care of, and that there are strong adults who know how to use their strength in a beneficial way, in a healthy way, that blesses your life and helps you to feel loved and beloved, even though you're not, okay, even though you're screwing up. Wow. And so we don't feel loved, we don't feel safe, we don't feel cared for, we don't feel like we're important. And then we find something along the way that helps us to feel loved, cared for, important, safe. And sex does all of that. Sexual feelings provide a sense of attachment, a sense of connection, a sense of love. Most of the time, as I get to know people in their journey, they have these amazing fantasy experiences where all of those needs get met. Like they find a way in their fantasy they think it's about sex, and it's really not. It's really about all these underlying needs that are being met, of being important, safe, loved, strong, wanted, desired, seen as the man, and I feel like that in the fantasy experience, and I don't feel like that in my real life. And so I'm going to go back to that just because my soul needs affirmation of all those things that I didn't get in my growing up experience. And that's childhood.
We look for the validation.
Right.
We're looking for validation, but we're looking for other places other than going to God for the validation.
Yeah. Well, and we need that validation from good men. We need that validation from fathers, from uncles, from friends, from peers. All of those places are good places to get it. But really underneath that, there are these deep needs that we have in our hearts that we all need as men that just help us to feel like we're the beloved son, right? And then the cowboy stage is the next stage. You have what it takes. You're strong, you're tough, you're powerful, and you get to explore and challenge yourself and fail and succeed and learn from it and have be able to have a sense of your identity being intact. You're still a good man. You are tough, even though you're crying. You're still strong. You're still good, even though you screwed up. That balance, and most of the time we're not getting that. And so then if I can close my eyes or go in the other room and have an experience where I feel all those things being fulfilled, I mean, the draw, and then you add sexuality on top of that, it's like, moth to
I
flame.
think you've said that so beautifully, because that's, when I'm just thinking of my own story or talking to clients, or it's like porn fills all of those things so quickly and so easily with no rejection. Right. I'm like, you've never been watching porn and had them be like, wait, who are you? Oh, I'm not taking my clothes off for that. Right. Like Nick said, no porn video
rejection.
ever. Right.
No.
And so, so it's like when there's no risk of these core desires not being met. Right. That's what makes it so toxic. That's what makes it so drawing. Because people get hung up on the sex, right? And they're like, it's about sex. And I just love how you shared that. Because to me, I'm like, dude, if you get nothing else from this, replay those last 3 minutes, whatever it was. Like, that is why men look at porn.
Exactly.
That's the reason.
Yeah. And it happens at such a young age that we have we aren't making connections with that. Like, no guy would, if you sat down with them the very first time, would say, oh, it's because of, but once you get to know them, once they get to know themselves, it's all about these core things that haven't happened. And so that's the fathering that we're talking about. And mothering is hugely critical. Mothering is what brings that beloved son, message a ton as well. But there's just something about a man being taught, led, loved by a man that is soulful, that we need. And when that doesn't happen, we're gonna get that sense of masculinity somewhere, and sex is a really easy way to feel masculine. So it just becomes a natural draw, and if we don't have that more deep soulful experience somewhere, we'll go find it there. And so even talking about watching porn or whatever, it's more what we're doing with it in our heads and what we're doing with it in our hearts to fill these places that haven't been filled in the right way with the right kinds of things. We haven't been led through that initiation process where these good messages and this sense of identity gets laid down very well. When that doesn't happen, we got to fill that need somewhere. And so we find a counterfeit that works. And for some people, it's drugs and sex and religion and all sorts of things that can give us those messages. But in good, healthy fatherfulness, we get those things down into our identity, down into our souls, and we don't have to just act like we have that. It actually, we feel settled in that. And it's rare to find somebody, in my experience, men who feel like that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of you talk about the up until 12 years old, the experience ideally is that you experience just being beloved, just being the beloved son. And it's like,
just learn what it's like to be loved.
That just kind of hits me, because I'm like, if I go back there, I'm like, nope, I didn't get that. Yeah. And so just, I think any of our listeners, it's like, were you there?
Yeah, and it's funny too. I mean, I'm thinking about what you said about Kurt Frankum, and his experience, and I'm like, I grew up with really good parents, by most standards, and I felt really loved by them at times, but then I wouldn't at times, and there were certain things that would happen. I just see the look on their face, and I'd be like, if they're that upset about this, I'm not going to ever let them know about that. And so then there's these other things that I'm hiding. And so I never got loved in the places where I felt the worst, because there was no way to share that. There was no way to talk to them and feel like I could be loved at the same time, because those were off limits, those were unacceptable, those were whatever. And whether they would have or not, I don't know, but it wasn't made safe to me to be able to have those kinds of experiences. And so even, James, you're kind of saying, well, it didn't happen. Well, even if it does, the variability of that, the lack of safety that comes from that, the sense of insecurity that comes from that. That's all it takes. And so, it really takes a parent who can be in tune with their child and let them be real, it's really tough to do, especially without that fathering. And that's why this tends to be a pattern that becomes intergenerational. And, fathers who haven't been fathered father the best they can. And you may do better. My dad did better than his dad for sure. But it still wasn't enough. And, ultimately the fact that I had to find that path myself, through other places just means that, sometimes our parents just don't have what we need. And that's every parent. I don't have everything my kids need either, but.
See, and I was confused when I first met your dad up at boot camp. He was there and I'm like, this is the nicest guy I've ever met. This guy's like super awesome, great guy. And I'm like, how is Rob fatherless? I'm like, this is a great guy.
Yeah.
But when I didn't even remember asking you that question, like looking at you and talking to you, and it was like, hey, how have you been fatherless? He just wasn't there for you in every way that he needed, that you needed him to be. Right. Yep. That's why we go out looking for other things. We're looking for God, but instead we were looking at porn, or we're looking for these other things to fill that. Right.
Yeah. And an example of that would be, I had an experience in, I don't know, was it junior high, 7th, 8th grade, somewhere in there, where I got this idea that there's got to be, my dad he was so nice, and he would always tell us, love people and be kind and all that sort of thing. And I'm like, there's this point where you have to be able to stand up and be strong, and that masculinity that stands up against what's wrong. And like this warrior heart was kind of waking up inside of me. And he just said, no, it's always wrong to use aggression of any kind. And, that was like a dagger for me. And, and that's part of why this message resonated so much with me, Wild at Heart, is because it was permission to be fierce. The fierceness was good and needed. And somehow inside of me, I just knew that. And so that's one of my, big wounds that really affected me. And that's an example, right? And so he's trying to teach this one principle. You teach too much of that and not enough of the other. And with good intentions to try and help your kids be loving people.
And I think generally in church culture, we lean that way, right?
Oh, yeah.
To be, as Eldridge describes it, the nice guy. And I have thought KB recently, one of his lyrics on his new album was, you want to be like Jesus, might need to flip some tables.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's so like, I even share that with people they're like, whoa, like there's this, right? Because in church we see Jesus with the lamb over his shoulders, and we're super into that. And that is him. There's just this other part of his heart too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he was not politically correct. he was downright harsh with, the ultra religious who weren't, were elevating themselves and putting down others. And so, but he could go back and forth. He knew how to navigate it, and obviously he'd been fathered well. He'd been fathered by his father. He had 3 decades of fathering, of being the beloved son, and then being fathered and having these 40 days and 40 nights. Like that was all masculine initiation experiences to prepare him for what he had to do. And he couldn't have done it without that.
So that's a great segue that you're bringing up here, and Chris, you're kind of touching on that as you're talking with Rob here. But how talk to us about being fathered by God. You've talked about how we can kind of experience that masculine journey through accomplishing some things, even just repairing some things, right? Watching a YouTube video, or to your point of surrounding ourselves with some good men and getting some validation and fathering from good men with good hearts. Take us into that next step of how does somebody walk into starting to be initiated and fathered by God?
Yeah, that's a good question. Do you want to say anything about that, Chris? You were kind of talking about that validation piece. I don't know if you have anything there. I mean,
well, I think part of it begins with understanding how he's initiating us, because so I've got boys that are, one's 18 and one is 15, and I can't I'm like immersed in this message of fatherlessness and the Warrior Heart Boot Camp, and this whole message of God and being beloved and everything. That is a huge part of my life. But even having that being part of my life, I cannot father my boys in every way that they need to be fathered. And what's cool is watching and inviting other men to father my boys in ways that they need to be fathered. And like even just going up hiking, I invite some of my boys along with me with some other men that I'm close with, some other really cool men.
Right.
And they start talking to my boys, and they're initiating them into manhood in so many different ways. And it's beautiful to just kind of step back and watch as I watch God work through other men to touch the hearts of my boys.
Yeah, I mean, just the presence of another man who likes you. I mean, there's so much going on in that kind of a process, and so I think a lot of this.
So well said.
Yeah.
Just say that again.
Yeah.
Just being in the presence of another man who likes you.
Yeah.
Is fathering and restorative.
Oh, well, it speaks to that beloved son thing that goes so poorly for most of us. Like, this guy's cool. He's and he really likes me. He's taking an interest in me. We need hundreds, if not thousands, of those kinds of experiences that without being forceful or overdone, trying too hard. Just that
you need to talk to my son about this kind of stuff.
Right,
it's not like that. It's like they just go.
Yeah, and you can tell when somebody's doing something spontaneous. That's what makes this initiation process so tricky. You can tell the difference between somebody who has an agenda. I'm going to father you right now. And that was one of the things that my dad did a lot of, is he always had an agenda. Like, it was, I'm going to teach you this right now. And so it was hard to just have those times when you're just hanging out. Like, it was always very driven, focused, and it had its good for sure. But anyway, it's I think that's, it's getting that sense from somebody, right? That sense of you like me, that sense of that kind of, we don't even think it. We can just feel it, and our hearts are just comforted, and we just kind of relax into that. And so that's what, that's what's so cool about your story, Chris, is because there's something really big going on there. And so I think in the scriptures, there's a lot of references about being a son versus being an orphan, and I think most of us, if we're really honest, when it comes to the really hard stuff and the really personal stuff and the stuff that we feel a lot of shame about or a lot of fear about, we act more like orphans. We live more like orphans than we do as sons. A son, in the truest sense, a son who feels beloved, a son who feels accepted, can take anything to God. And so really what we have to start with is, what's your perception of God? And unfortunately, our perception of God oftentimes correlates highly, highly, highly with our perception of men. What are men like? What are leaders like? And how they act is how God must feel. And I think a lot of times leaders underestimate the impact of their behavior on people. They think they're just teaching a principle, and actually they're modeling what God must feel like towards them, which has a much broader, much huger impact. Where I may not feel safe going to God because I don't feel safe going to you. God wouldn't want to hear about this. You don't seem to. God will be mad. You're mad. And so there's a lot, and we take a lifetime of experiences and we synthesize it in milliseconds, and then we come to conclusions about what he's like. And so for most guys that want to take this journey, the first thing you have to do is you have to have a redo on what God is like.
Yeah.
You have to start almost from scratch. You just have to kind of, burn the ships. And
well, that's the Shack guy, right? That says the face of your earthly father on the face of God.
Yeah.
Right. I think where that guy's from. And
Yep.
I had this experience. So I still have littles. So it was my son at 3. I'm playing basketball in the driveway on the normal size hoop, and I bring out his kid hoop, the little plastic one.
Yeah.
And he keeps trying to shoot on the big hoop.
Yep.
Because he hasn't had enough damaging from me
Right.
and shaming from me and from the world to tell him he doesn't have what it takes.
That's right. That's
and
right.
to tell him, and also I love what you said about risk, right? And to think that you shouldn't take the risk.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that moment, I'm sitting there and I'm like, dude, you cannot make it on this bigger hoop. Shoot on the smaller
Yeah.
one. And I'm starting to get like frustrated. Like,
Yep.
no, you don't get it. Because the perfectionism's coming into me, right?
Sure.
You can make it on that little hoop. You can't make. And then I like stepped back and I saw it. So I took a picture of it. Because I was like, he is literally asking me right now if I have what it takes. Because real men shoot on the real hoop.
That's right.
He's 3 and he already gets like the dialogue's already
It's just
going,
wired
you know?
in. Yeah,
it's
it's
just
just
like you
wired
say,
in.
like that perspective is just wired in, you know?
Yeah.
So then I think to myself, because of my own shame, I'm like, man, how many times have I already shamed him
Sure.
in his first 3 years of life? As I'm sitting here and finally noticing it now, and will
Right.
in the future still
Right.
shame him.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the point isn't trying at the one you want to make it in. The point is to make the basket.
Right.
Yeah,
That's my
You
perfectionism.
got to shoot at this one so you can make
Yeah.
it in. He's like, no, I'll just keep trying. I don't mind. I don't mind not getting there. I just want to shoot at the basket Dad shoots at.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be
Totally.
like Dad. I mean, all of that stuff is just driven by this need for masculine initiation. One of the stories I really like that sort of illustrates this comes from Michael Jordan, who is well known to be the best, if not one of the best basketball players ever. And he always had this. He had his dad, and if you watch The Last Dance, when he lost his dad, he kind of lost his way. He couldn't function without a father figure, and so he found this guy who became his new father figure. And once he got that going again, he was able to come back and make a comeback and win a couple more championships. But the key piece, he had one man, and it's such a incredible picture if you get a chance to watch it of what that masculine initiation is like. He needed an older man who could ground him, who he could turn to, who was always reliable, always there, wouldn't BS him, would tell him the truth, but loved him and supported him no matter what. And with that, he did incredible things. And without that, he struggled. And so when his dad died, and until he found this other man, it's pretty amazing. When you think of somebody like that who appears to be so self-contained and so excellent without anybody's help, and if you watch that show, it's really a good illustration of this.
So you brought this up earlier, but you basically said one of the first steps on this masculine journey when it comes to being fathered by God is really taking a look at who we think God is. And probably needing to dismantle a lot of those falsities that got placed there through
Our experiences
and our imperfections, our imperfect parents and imperfect leaders and things like that.
And a lot of those get laid down so young, we just take them for granted. They're like givens. We talk about them in boot camp as agreements where we just leave certain things. You have to really go in and challenge that. I mean, if he is a good being who's a good father, think of who you want to hang out with. Think of who you want to hang around with. Think of who you want to be close to, who you want to be close to you, the guy you would take into the fire, in battle. If God isn't like that for you in your personal experience or in your life, then if you don't find him like that, you will never be able to be fathered by him, because the fathering experience is one that happens in your heart and in your soul. And someone who's not safe, someone who can't stay present with you while you're messy and screwing up, someone who runs away, someone who's constantly disappointed with you or constantly feeling like you're inadequate, telling you're inadequate, or acting like you are, or man, when you're not doing this, I'll really be able to stay close to you, but I'm going to go away until you change and or behave, I'll love you when you behave. I'll be around when you behave. We need the guy who's going to take a bullet for us. And he did. I mean, literally he did. And so he's a guy who's not scared of all of our ugliness and all of our messiness, who understands shame, who understands the human heart, who understands wounding, who understands all the things that affect us so deeply. If he lacks perception in that, then he's not God. And so someone who can hold all that, all of the messiness of the whole world, and love and push, know when to push, know when to love, know when to push, know when to love, and let us go through hard things for a long time until we're ready to turn to him and say, I need something new. And so having without that, we're just orphans. If you don't feel like a son in the best way, you're gonna have a hard time going to him in any of those things. And so a lot of times that's the initial step in the initiation process, is realizing that what you've been given will not work to be initiated, that you've got to find a God with a heart that you would want to be close to, that you would want to walk with, and who thinks of you and feels toward you in a way that you can receive and accept, and makes your heart want to come alive, makes you want to be a better man, and you can be really messy in the process. You can start off not even knowing if you're the beloved son, and he doesn't even care. Wait, I'm 40, I'm 50. That I should be past that by now. No, son, you shouldn't. Like, you've never spent time with me. You've never just been with me and felt what I feel like toward you. You're a mess, and I love it, and you don't. You won't let me in. You won't let me hold you. You won't let me see you. You won't let me accept you. And so that's probably the second thing I would say, is that you got to realize that in your own heart, things have not gone well. This initiation process hasn't gone well, and therefore your experiencing of God probably hasn't gone well. And so you've got to recognize, what are the things that I believe about you, and then, work on it, work through it. And one of the, really cool things that I've learned is that he'll sit there and hold your hand and let you yell or scream or swear or whatever it is, while he gets it. He can hold it all. And I'm scared of you. I don't like you. I think you're a jerk.
I don't trust you.
I don't trust you.
Yeah.
I think you're just a control freak, whatever it is.
And so you're just you would invite the men to just lean into that and just
lean into your story. He knows it. He already knows it. Okay. He's not upset. He would understand why you're feeling that way because of your life experiences. I mean, nobody's story happens in a vacuum. Right. And so if he knows every hair that falls from your head, and he knows what happened, and so he's like, son, I get it. I know what happened to you. I get why you feel this way, and you can tell me about it. You can explain it to me, and I will listen, and I will care, and I have space for that. And so that's a really different from what I got, at least, in my religious experience.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think a lot of our listeners are probably like, well, I don't even think God loves me because everything that I've done, I can't see God's love. And I think a really good depiction of understanding, or a good way for them to understand God's true love for them, is to listen to The Inheritance. Mm-hmm. I was just speaking at a fireside and brought this up, and The Inheritance by Jonathan David Helser. If you go and listen to that and you watch the YouTube video of it with the lyrics, it's just incredible of how deep he gets with God's love for you, no matter where you are. He absolutely loves you 100% for where you are right now.
Yeah. I remember the first boot camp when you brought that one in, Rob, and it just ripped everybody apart. It's just an amazing song. Just, it's, again, just Rob just, making waves and like changing lives left and right again.
The first time
because it flips the script
to us.
It does. It totally.
Right. It flips the script because you called it out so sharply when you're like, it's about making the basket.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so
exactly.
Yes, you can't go prodigal son and say, God, give me my inheritance. I'm going to go to a foreign land and I still expect to show up in your house.
Mm-hmm.
Like, right. When you leave to the foreign land, you're not in his house. That's still true. Mm-hmm. But we then go, well, but that's his love because love is making the basket.
Right.
So we separate, am I receiving all that God has for me versus does he love me?
Yeah.
And so you're probably right. If you're living a dual life, at least for me, when I was not receiving all that God had for me.
No,
that's true.
Yeah.
But his love was unconditional through that process.
Sure.
But that fake fathering or lack of fathering in our lives teaches us literally the opposite.
Yep.
Right? That no, it's about achieving is right. Like
it's about,
that's the happening, right? And so it's like
it's
if
about
it
performing,
goes right. I mean, that's
sinning,
one of the reasons
sinning.
I stayed in addiction. Is because I'm like, well, God knows I'm working on it. I just got married. I'm making money at this, young job. I'm in a bishopric at 24. If God was mad, then I wouldn't be getting all these blessings, quotation mark, because I was so flipped on that script. And to your guys' point, had to completely dismantle who God was and rewire it.
Right.
In the correct way, which is the opposite of how I was doing.
So, Rob, we just thank you so much for coming in here and being here with us today. Like and just the fathering that you have given each of us. It's been phenomenal. Something that we talked about, I think, before we were recording was just the ripple effect that Rob starting the boot camp and the ripple effect that has had on thousands of men's lives. The change
and families, not just the men's lives. It's just the whole families and their kids and their extended family.
Right. Just the ripple effect that it's affected so many people's lives, and just the power of, stepping into something big, risky, and going in and making it happen. So Rob, I just wanted to honor you and thank you so much for having the courage to start that boot camp. Because without it, I know that my life would be so different than it is today. I know that Chris's life would be different from his, that Steve's would be, and that Jason's would be. And the lives of our families and our children would be different. That this podcast probably would not exist. Just the ripple effect that has, Rob, and we just want to honor you and thank you for having the courage to step into that.
Oh, thanks, James. I appreciate that. And if I can just reflect something back from that, as you're saying that, I'm like, if it hadn't been for being so, having such deep father wounds or wounds of fatherlessness in my life, I never would have been so compelled to want to share this with so many men. Like, I experienced this shift and this change, and I was like, I know so many men that need this. I've got to share this. And none of this would have happened. And so in God's economy, that's he takes something like that's like brokenhearted, 30-something-year-old guy who's wrecked, and then can take him and use him for something that just has so many ripple effects. I mean, I had no idea. I pictured
beauty for ashes principle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was like, I pictured 10 guys at my grandpa's cabin, doing this. And next thing you know, we got 50 guys in a room, including Chris, and at this, event center. And it was like, you got to be kidding me. And so it's just crazy how that works. And had it not been for my broken heart, for the fatherlessness that I'd experienced, I wouldn't have had that change of heart. I wouldn't have had this just incredible, intense desire to share it with so many other men. And so,
and you had that willingness to let Father guide you to be fathered by God.
Yeah.
At that point.
Chris, at that point, God was so good. I didn't want to do anything but just share how good he was, because it was just life-changing to be like, he is so good. He cares so much. All the things I care about, he cares about. All the things that matter to me matter to him. He put those desires in my heart. We're together in that. I don't have to hide it from him. We get to share in it and thrill in it together. And so just that whole message, I'm just like, oh man. And so I just wanted to say that, like, that's how it works, that, that's a good example, James, back to your point of beauty for ashes.
Well, and I would like to take it a step further than that, Rob, if you're willing. I would like to give everyone the opportunity to be fathered by you in the way that you have fathered so many men. And so you know the heart of the men that are listening to this podcast. Uh-huh. You don't bump your head on iTunes and go find the podcast that's obscure about men sharing addiction recovery stories. You don't accidentally run into this one because it's in the top 10 in your feed.
Right.
And so both the men and a lot of women here too, but these men who are so fatherless, like so fatherless and so wounded, if they were here, because really they are, and you were to pray for them and to teach them how to pray. I wonder if you're open to that now.
Yeah, sure. We could do that. So you want me to pray as if I were
if
praying
they were
for
here?
them? Yeah.
If we had a couple of those guys here who are totally lost in their fatherlessness and are like, cool story, guys, but God is not. I'm too far gone. It's all rigid.
Yeah.
I know him, air quotes, and he's not here for me. I've prayed the thee thou prayer.
Sure.
He's not answering.
Sure.
If we put him in your hands to be fathered in prayer, Rob.
Yeah, we could jump into that. Do you want to just go for it?
Yeah, let's pray.
Okay.
Let's take the risk.
All right.
And I'm gonna teach you what Rob taught me, that if this prayer is true for you, I invite you to pray with us right now and to use Rob's words and to let him in. Yeah.
And I'm going to pray in the first person, but it would be so that people can pray for themselves. And if there's something in that I say that it seems weird or doesn't fit, I mean, I want guys to feel like they don't necessarily have to agree with everything. We kind of pray in this way where it's like we're supposed to agree with everything in a prayer. And I just find that different people are in different places. So feel free to make it fit for you.
Father us up, Rob.
Okay. Father, we are, I come to you as a wounded man. This whole thing about fatherlessness is kind of new. It's kind of weird. It freaks me out a little bit. I'm just learning about it. Something in it really makes sense to me, but I'm not sure. It feels a little weird. It feels a little different. I'm not used to this sort of thing. I'm even talking to you right now in like a really familiar way that I'm not used to. And I don't even know if it's okay. I'm hoping that some of what I've heard here is true. Something in me just says, I need something more. I need something deeper. I need something that will reach my heart, that will reach my soul, that just feels like deep water filling my heart and soul. I hope so bad that you are better than I ever imagined, that you are more kind, that you are more loving, that you're more understanding, and more willing to be hard on me when that's what I need. When you see that out of love, and let me make the mistakes that I make, I just and just have this beautiful plan to send Jesus on a giant cleanup mission. This is such a messy process. I hope you can accept me as I am. I want to believe that. I want to let that into my heart more and more. I want to see this love that they talked about for me. I want to see something like that. Help me to see it. Bring me experiences over the next days and weeks where you show me in nature and in the words of friends or in the words I read. Help me to see you in a way I've never seen you before. Help me to surrender, let go of, reject things, beliefs in my heart that have kept me far from you, made it unsafe to be with you, made it unsafe to be real with you, to be myself with you. I give you my shame. I give you my fear. I give you my invulnerability that walls me up and keeps me away from you and everybody. And I give you just a little doorway into my heart. It's going to take me a while. I don't know you this way. You got to work with me. And it sounds like from what I'm hearing that you'll take me by the hand and you'll walk with me. You'll meet me right where I am, and you'll walk right alongside me as I go. And so that someday I can look back on my life and maybe believe in some way that you were actually walking alongside me this entire time, and that Jesus was walking behind me, picking up those pieces. I give my sin and mistakes to you. I accept the work of Christ in my behalf. And I really want to walk with you and talk with you and share my life with you and share my struggles with you and share my weaknesses with you and celebrate my joy and the little breakthroughs that aren't little, they're huge. And for you to see me as I am and feel good about it, feel okay about it. And so I hope in some small way I can start to do that. And thank you for being so patient, so kind to wait this long for me. And I receive that love, that part of that love that I felt during this conversation into my heart. I'm going to bookmark it. I'm going to put a mark there that I can go back to this over and over again and start from there and just build slowly over time or quickly, however it works, this relationship with you that makes it so that you can be a resource to me and you can speak to me and tell me when you're sending other men what you're up to change my life and make it work in a different way. And so thank you for the love that you've shown me. Thank you for your kindness to me. Thanks for just waiting around until I was ready and my heart was open, and help it to stay open. And thanks for all you've done to prepare the way to clean up this mess. It's a big one. And thank you for loving me like that. And I hope we can spend more time like this. And I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Thank you so much, Rob.